The 14th Amendment states, "No state shall deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." Hello adventurers and welcome back to my channel. Today we are here in Little Rock, Arkansas at a site that you need to stop off at next time that you're passing through. This is the Little Rock Central High National Historic Site. I've brought my mom with me, so we're off to an adventure. We're starting off right here with our map. We are at the Visitor Center. Across the street, right here, is actually the Historic Mobile Station, which is considered an education center. And then as we cross across this way, that is the Central High. Now before we go inside, let me tell you a little bit about Central High and its part in our world today. At one point in time, schools were completely segregated, meaning that black students and white students could not go to school together. And at some point, someone finally thought, that's not okay, guys. We need to have everybody learning together. But a single step had to be taken before that could happen, and that was overcoming racism. That's not something you can do easily, so 9 brave children and their families stood up and said, okay, we're going to be those people. And they faced so much in order to make it happen. Outside you can find signs like this one that tell a little bit more about the attitudes and the things that were going on at the time. And then this one right here, anytime it takes 11,500 soldiers to assure that 9 children have their constitutional rights, I can't be happy. That's so true. It shouldn't take that much to change the world. And this right here, this is the Little Rock 9. Now normally as I go places with mom, I kind of go back and forth with her and we talk about things as we go through. But because this is a place that has a lot of material, I want her to be able to fully enjoy it. So I think we're just gonna catch up with her at the end. We're all familiar with this right here, we the people. But this booth actually asks us to look deeper and see if we are actually the included people that they're talking about. Each of these sections talks about different things that were guaranteed at different times. For example, I as a woman in 1789, my rights were restricted. Right there. It says it right there. It wasn't until 1920 that I was given the right to vote. Our Native American friends, you know, the people who lived here before all of us, they were actually guaranteed no rights. None. They weren't even considered citizens. It wasn't until 1924 that they were guaranteed that they could be recognized for tribal rights and citizenship. Freed African Americans were not guaranteed rights. It didn't distinguish them in the Constitution as any different than enslaved Americans. It wasn't until 1857 with the Dred Scott decision that they ruled that although Scott had lived for many years as a free person, that he had no standing to even sue in a federal court because he had no different rights. That was of course invalidated by the 14th Amendment in 1868. And then enslaved people, right here. Slavery was abolished by the Emancipation Proclamation in Confederate States and by the 13th Amendment in 1865. However, as we look around Central High, you'll notice that even though slavery was abolished, that still did not guarantee basic human rights. Now, something that's crazy about what we just looked at is that even to this day, we still deal with a lot of things that happened even in our country's past. We haven't quite figured out all those details, and that's really sad because in reality, it shouldn't be that hard. Everyone deserves basic human rights. Everyone deserves to be treated really well. Like, you're supposed to treat other people how you want to be treated, but that doesn't happen. So places like this are super important because they tell us about the steps that have been taken just to get that to happen. And still we continue to repeat old behaviors. This is a video that's going to be a little sensitive. It's going to be a little touchy, but it's a video that needs to be made. So come along with me, and I'm going to show you some of the grim American history. Here we learn a little bit more about Jim Crow. Jim Crow came along even after enslaved people were told that they no longer needed to worry. They had rights. But in the southern states, Jim Crow laws were developed to hold people back. What it's telling us here is that these laws restricted the rights of African Americans to enjoy public facilities. That means your grocery stores, that means your restaurants, your schools, all of those things. You can see here that even at the bus station, they had a separate section for black and white people. At these seats, you can sit down and listen to the stories of some of the people that actually were a part of the Little Rock Nine. You can learn about segregation and how it affected real people. At that time, life was very separate. There wasn't a whole lot of intermingling of anything because of these restrictions and laws. And because of that, you would often see people who thought they were the exalted ones versus the lowly ones. And that's not okay. No one is better than anyone. And that's whenever things started to change. Things started to go to the courts. As African Americans started to fight back, they formed unions and groups. And they created a panel of people who were determined to make a change. Right here, you can see in this section some of that change and how it was being made. The landmark decision of Brown versus the Board of Education said that it was no longer okay to have separate facilities for blacks versus whites. They had to find a way to fix it. And through that, the Little Rock Nine became possible. Now, it still wasn't going to be an easy road, but the Supreme Court had backed up this decision. So the first steps could be taken. Of course, as those steps were taken, southern states rebelled. They revolted. They were upset. They did not think that it was just or right. And it was highly documented, so you could easily find numerous examples of how the white Southerners felt as though the black Southerners were taking over. And they didn't like it. Not one little bit. They tried to say that it was illegal or that it was communism. And they tried to talk out against people who were in support of it, even going as far as to harm others. But no amount of their anger could change what was inevitable. Central High was going to happen. Whether it was at Central High or some podunk place in Alabama, there would be change, and it would be met with great resistance. However, in the face of adversity, that's whenever the best things happen. Out this window, we can see Central High, located on Park Street right there. There's a sign right inside from this view that says, Park Street is much quieter today. Hostility and prejudice that surfaced then are still a part of our lives today, and it still challenged us to stand up and respond to the injustice. It also asks you to question, what would you have done if you were an African American student in 1957? How would you have responded if you were a white student? What about as a parent of a black or a white student? How, as a teacher, would you have handled what was going on? It also asks you to question yourself. If you were in that situation, how would you have reacted? Would you have done anything different? If you could take back something from right now into that time, what would you take back to change everything? That same view that we just had, this was it. This was it whenever they were bringing in the Little Rock Nine. Daily, guards had to stand on the street to keep them protected. 9 children, none of them over the age of 18, and it required all of this just to make sure they were okay. Police would have to fight off angry mobs that were so enraged by the fact that there were black students in what they thought was a white school. People would spit, say nasty names, hold picket signs. This right here is an unruly student who was having to be marched away at gunpoint because he was threatening. Right here, firefighters were having to use hoses to stop marchers who were protesting the reopening of the school in 1959. 2 years later, 2 years, and the conflict was still going on, that people were so outraged that black students were being allowed into the school. But then things like this would happen also. This was September 4th, 1957. Elizabeth Eckford. She was actually turned away by the Arkansas National Guard as she approached the school she was supposed to be enrolled in. Federal court had already ordered that she was supposed to be there, but the governor of Arkansas ordered the guardsmen not to allow them to enter. Meanwhile, this woman over here is entering without a problem. Now this continues to show the impact of this single act. It says here that beyond Central High, other places were slow to allow integration. They took gradual efforts or would allow token efforts. By 1966, only 16% of African American students in the South were actually attending school with white students. And it has continued to be slow progress. Many times through districting, African American students are put into predominantly African American or black schools, even to this day. Funding is not evenly distributed, and as people look at things and want to pick them apart, they tend to gloss over those details. But that's still a reality here in 2021 when I'm filming this. The section that Mom is looking at right now is about different individuals who have made a difference. And there's a couple of the stories that are on this wall that will break every piece of your heart. If you look kind of right in front of Mom, there's the story of Emmett Till. That's absolutely traumatic and terrible. But then you see a few other people that you might not be quite as familiar with. Here we have the Selma to Montgomery voting march. That was in 1965. Here we see in 1945, the governor in Alaska was actually signing an anti-discrimination act, and this was to protect the natives who lived in Alaska. At one point in time, they were as severely discriminated against as blacks were in the United States. You can see here just a few of the things. This one will hurt your feelings really badly, because in America, in our own America, we actually had internment camps. During the war, they interred Japanese people, and they actually had a couple of sites here in Arkansas that this happened. And it was basically a slightly nicer version than a concentration camp, but people were displaced from their homes and their families, and you can read a little bit more about those as you go down this sign here. Over 100,000 Japanese Americans were transported to these kind of remote places. They lived in these barrack-style homes. They were completely guarded by barbed wire, and they had guard shacks, so they couldn't leave. They weren't there on their own accord. And this happened right here in the United States. Of course, we mostly hear about Martin Luther King and his works. This right here is Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce. In 1879, he actually said, "The earth is the mother of all people, and all people should have equal rights upon it." Of course, we know that the Native Americans weren't guaranteed those rights, though. Now, with all the progress that was made at Central High, there was a stop. At some point, there was a petition that was large enough to stop the integration process, and they call this the lost year. There was a whole year where they kept delaying and delaying and delaying this, hoping that it would just go away or could be swept under the rug. This is called the lost year, and this wall right here talks a little bit more about that. Propaganda like this was circulated. This was the civil docket right here. We see here that once the students did actually get into the classrooms, it wasn't any better. In fact, it was probably worse. They endured constant harassment, kicking, hitting, pulling up their hair, calling them names, talking down to them, talking to them as though they didn't exist, or just ignoring them altogether. This would have to be like a psychological thing that would be so crazy, and to be so young and to go through this every single day repetitiously, that would be something that none of us would completely be able to fathom. So for them to do this and to remain strong and true and to talk about it even today is impressive, to say the least, and inspirational. Here it says that Nonfamily, this was Thelma Mothershed, even said that the harassment got so bad that people would call her home and say that if she came back to school, they would blow her house up. That's insane. So as a result, the last person who was up for the night just took the phone off the hook. These are copies of some of the original newspapers that covered this. They called it everything from hoaxes to talking about the threats and the violence that were erupting outside. Central High was then called a battleground. It was a violent place. It was not a place of comfort or relaxation. It wasn't a place where you could be relaxed like a lot of kids are today. It was a place where every day meant you had to come to school knowing something crazy was going to happen, and just hoping that you could just go there to get your education, the basic right that you deserve. I don't know guys, this entire thing is insane. To know that this is how everything started, and to know that today we still struggle. This has been years. Why? These are a few of the others of the individuals who make a difference. There are several that I want to highlight. These were the Freedom Riders. They actually had to gather outside of their own burning bus in Alabama. This was in 1961. People didn't like what they were doing, so they tried to murder them. And they did so by setting their bus on fire. These children right here in Birmingham, Alabama, 1963, were participating in one of the many mass marches against the segregation that was happening in their area. These kids were standing up to say, we deserve better. We deserve that. It is our right to have a good education. This is the Civil Rights March of 1963. I've been here. This place right here is huge. It is so huge. This is the Washington right there, and the Lincoln is all the way back toward where the camera is. It was packed, and people were even out into the trees, which go on for quite some distance to the side. This is Selma, 1965. State troopers decided to use tear gas to break up a demonstration. There was no violence, but they responded with tear gas. Right here, you see Greensboro, North Carolina. This was the diner sit-in. These men were told they could not come here because they were black. They couldn't sit here because they were black. This was another sit-in. It was at a lunch counter in Jackson, Mississippi, 1963. These people sat at the counter, and as a result, they had ketchup, water, mustard, sugar, anything that could be found poured over their heads. They were mocked, spit at, called names, kicked at the stools, all for sitting down at a counter. We have right here something that is very personal to me. These are women marching down Pennsylvania Avenue in DC, 1977. They were fighting for equal rights. Of course, before them came suffrage people, and there are many, many women who marched for the women's suffrage movement just to be able to have voting rights. Now, what's the difference between equal rights and voting rights? That's what a lot of people don't understand. People stand up and say, oh, you can vote, you can do whatever you want to. No, that's not the truth. A lot of times the two are not tied together whatsoever. There are certain aspects of the way that our rights work that have nothing to do with just our ability to vote. We need to be able to access certain kinds of things. And a lot of times those are the rights that get taken away because they're the easiest to justify in the eyes of others. So suffrage led to equal rights. Remember that. And then this right here, I recently watched a documentary about. I didn't know too much about it at all, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. This group right here fought for Americans with disabilities, and the way that they did it was insane. They literally rolled through portions of Washington. They climbed up stairs, crawling on their arms and legs. They wanted basic things, accessibilities. That's all. Now, before we go over to the school, I did pick up this. I think this is a wonderful quote, and it actually applies to not just the subject matter today, but I think life. Without a struggle, there can be no progress. Isn't that the truth? Okay, we have arrived at Central High. Now, it was right across from the Visitor Center, and this is a sprawling campus right here. This campus, if you were to just look at it, architecturally it's really pretty, but it has such a strange history, you know. It's got a lot of good, a lot of bad. And as you look at these steps right here, this is where, again, the vast majority of those photos that we iconically have seen in publications and at civil rights museums and places like that were taken, is right here. But let's turn our focus this way and look over here. Over here, you'll see, like, this is where my van is. This is the roadway, a portion of the roadway where the National Guard would have had to set up shop to make sure the kids could get in to this school right here. So the entire area was engulfed, and it was surrounded by this ugly, hateful thing. And over time, now there's beautiful flowers, there's quiet houses. The roadway is a one-way street that sees some through traffic, but it's nothing like it was then. Inside these halls, you can actually take a tour if you schedule in advance, and they'll take you through the different locations that some of the students would have had class in. That's really interesting to be able to still go into those classrooms and think about the experience that they had while they were sitting there inside this very school. Around the courtyard here, we found these benches, and it's kind of neat because this says past, present, and future students. So this is the bench of hope right here. And then all of these benches that surround are actually the names of the Little Rock Nine. Each person has one bench. Okay, Mom, before we go up the stairs, I've kind of left you alone so that you could kind of experience things and read through. Now that we're here, what do you think overall?
It is a very emotional journey to go back in history and to kind of put yourself in the place in 1957. I wasn't even alive then, so I can't imagine these students that would go up these steps every day, how they felt, and how they didn't even know that they were going to change the world like they did.
This right here, these are the very doors. And I realize kids go to school to this school every day still, as it is an active school. But the situations over the years have changed so much. And now all of those kids who pass through that door right there, they have that opportunity. Opportunity. It's quite a word, isn't it? Okay, we're now at the doors, and obviously we can't go in right now, but I just wanted to share kind of that experience and how many steps that it was. Now, if it were you, would you have counted each and every step as you were walking up every single day to kind of count down to just getting in the door? Because that's what I would have done. I would have tried to distract myself from all of the outward things that were going on and probably been like, only 5 more, only 3 more, only 1 more, and then finally inside. But really though, would it have been a relief to go inside? I guess that's the main thing here. There was all this going on out here, and then getting inside still wasn't better. But it ensured that future generations can have better. So with that, I'm gonna wrap this up today. It's been a great trip out here so that we could learn a little bit more about what has happened in the past. Because like I say, we have to learn from the past to make a better tomorrow. So let's make some good choices and try to start changing the world for the better. Till next time, guys, bye.